Janet had been an amazing spouse ever since our marriage a few years ago. Our bond was strong, and we enjoyed a fulfilling life together. Until now, she had never given me any reason to feel insecure or question her loyalty. That's why it caught me off guard when she asked me to meet the vice president of her company. 3 years ago, she began working for Global Connections, and she quickly rose to the role of marketing manager in a global entertainment organization. As you might imagine, she interacts with a wide variety of people and participates in numerous events, conferences, consulting sessions, and marketing meetings. Some of their high profile clients include the New York Knicks, the Chicago Bears, and the New England Patriots. Her vibrant and upbeat nature, paired with her intelligence and professionalism, made her an ideal fit for the organization. She often shared her plans, achievements, and daily work updates with me, and I always listened with pride in her success. She aspired to become the vice president of marketing and worked tirelessly to reach that goal. Global Connections is a British firm with offices worldwide, and its marketing vice president, Ian, is in his early 50s. He built his career through his own efforts and has been married 3 times, with 9 children, 3 from his current marriage. When Janet told me about her boss, I couldn't help but think how fortunate he was to have a high income to sustain his relationships and divorces. One evening, Janet began discussing Ian, describing her day entirely in a professional context, nothing personal. She mentioned that he would be visiting the United States for 2 months, giving her the opportunity to demonstrate her value to the company and express her interest in advancing her career. That's my wife, ambitious and focused on her goals. Recently, we had begun discussing having children, and I asked her if a promotion would influence our timeline for starting a family. She replied that she wanted to solidify her standing in the company while Ian was in the US and would let me know if we should proceed with our plans or delay them for another year. Either option was fine with me since we were still in our 20s and not in a rush to have kids. However, we both hoped for 2 children, a boy and a girl. We spent countless evenings choosing names and imagining their futures, including which universities they might attend. We were deeply in love and excited about raising a family together. A week after Ian arrived, I decided to surprise Janet at her office and invite her to lunch. When I entered her office, I saw Ian and Janet standing uncomfortably close, and she was laughing and acting flirtatiously. As soon as I greeted them, she quickly distanced herself from him. Janet introduced me to Ian, and I swear I saw a smug grin on his face. Ian, this is my husband, Brian. Brian, this is Ian, the executive vice president from our corporate headquarters. Remember, I told you he'd be here for a short time? And there it was again, a self-satisfied smirk as he said, well, hello there. So you're the little husband. Nice to meet you, but I must excuse myself. I'm running, late for a meeting, before hurrying out of the office without further conversation. His greeting struck me as extremely disrespectful, especially for someone in his position. Janet, what on earth was that? And why were you standing so close to him and laughing like that? I was in no mood for humor, and I had an overwhelming desire to knock that smug expression off his face, but he was already gone. Janet noticed my irritation over how the introduction went and tried to calm me. Relax, darling, it's just Ian. It was nothing but harmless. Flirting. Besides, he's old enough to be my father. Look, all the women are smitten with him. He thinks he's quite the charmer with that British accent, and he enjoys flirting, but we all know he's just an overconfident show-off. Still, he's the boss. Anyway, he's a family man, and you have no reason to worry. It's just playful teasing. Well, I don't like it, and the audacity of him to call me the little husband. Why are you encouraging him by flirting back? Oh, Brian, stop being jealous. Ian is the 3rd highest ranking person in the entire company, and I have to be courteous to him. Like I said, he fancies himself a ladies' man. That's just the way British men behave. Well, I don't like it. Calm down. He'll be leaving in 2 months. After that, things were tense at home for a few days. Janet avoided bringing up his name or doing anything to upset me further. Then, on Wednesday evening, about a week after the meeting with Ian at her office, Janet brought up something casually over dinner. Darling, do you mind if I have dinner with Ian? My boss from work. I stiffened slightly, needing a moment to fully process her question. I responded with one of my own. You mean like a business meeting? Well, no. It's more like a one-time dinner before he heads back to London. Instantly, I felt a tightness in my stomach and my heart began pounding faster. I sat in silence for a while before replying, I see. This is the same Ian who flirted with you and mocked me in your office? The so-called family man with 9 kids from 3 different wives? Well, yes, but he's turned out to be a rather pleasant person. He won't be staying much longer, and I'll probably never see him again after he returns to London. I thought one dinner would be harmless. Like I said, he's married with children. There wouldn't be anything romantic, just a little fun for one evening. That's all I'm asking. It might even help my career. I mean, you're always traveling for work, and one night out shouldn't be such a big deal. So it's not just dinner, it's a date. You're saying you want to spend an evening with him. Let me make this perfectly clear, Janet. I will not, under any circumstances, allow you to go on a date with another man while we're married. Do you understand? The fact that you even want to do this is making me question our entire marriage. Seeing my reaction, she became frantic. Oh, God, no! You've got it all wrong. I love you. You're my husband. Ian is just a one-time thing, and I'll be back the next day. Nothing between us will change, and he'll be gone from our lives forever. My God, it's just one night. I looked at her with fury and said simply, Get out of my life. I'm filing for divorce in the coming days. Then I got up, walked to the closet, packed a bag of clothes, and left. She kept begging me to stay as I drove away from what was once our happy home. In less than half an hour, my once joyful marriage had crumbled into ruin. Her calls started almost immediately, followed by an endless stream of text messages. She declared her love and insisted no one could ever take her place in my life. In another message, she tried to persuade me that I was still her loving husband, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and pleading with me to come home. As I drove, I kept reminding myself that if she could be tempted so easily, our future as a married couple was in jeopardy. Fixing this would require serious effort, if it was even possible at all. I stayed away for 2 nights, ignoring her calls and taking time off work. I asked my coworkers to tell her I had left town for a business trip. Ever since Ian appeared at Janet's office, the women there had been captivated by his commanding presence. He was tall, well-built, and spoke with an accent that was both alluring and mesmerizing. From the start, it was obvious to everyone that he had taken a special interest in Janet. His compliments, private meetings, shared lunches, and the extra attention he gave her made other women envious. Each one of them would have jumped at the chance to be in her position, married or not. Even the married women were vocal, encouraging her to take things further. Janet, he's asked you out a few times already. Any one of us would trade places with you in a heartbeat. He's so attractive, and that accent of his makes us all swoon. Go ahead, accept his offer, and enjoy the time with this powerful man. Opportunities like this don't come often. Brian doesn't need to know. He'll be back in London soon. To avoid future problems, the women at the office kept pressuring me relentlessly until I gave in. Deep down, I knew I could never betray my husband, so I devised a plan to ask Brian for permission to go on a single date, just one time. Afterward, I promised everything would return to normal. The women assured me that Brian would be reasonable and grant me this one night. That's what most of them believed. However, when I brought it up to him that evening, his reaction stunned me. His anger wasn't something I anticipated. And now he's gone. I can't believe he left like that. I never thought he'd be so upset. In a panic, I called Gail, one of my coworkers. She and I had started in the same department on the same day 3 years earlier, and we'd been inseparable ever since. Through sobs, I said, Gail, it's Janet. He's gone. He left me. Janet, what do you mean? She asked. I told Brian I wanted to have dinner with Ian, and he stormed out. He packed his things, walked out of the house, and even mentioned divorce. I'm terrified I've lost him. Nonsense. He's just upset because you bruised his ego, but he'll come back. You haven't done anything yet, and he knows that. He may sulk and stay mad for a few days, but he'll forgive you. We'll come up with another plan to get you and Ian together. Trust me. I don't want this. I just need my husband, I cried. Janet, take a deep breath, pour yourself a glass of wine, and relax. I'll see you at work tomorrow. Despite Janet's hesitation, the planning continued. Brian returned home 2 days later, but moved into the second bedroom. Gail was right. Brian's anger was intense, far more than anyone expected. While he still loved Janet, he made it clear that if Ian's name came up again, he'd pursue a divorce. At a minimum, marriage counseling seemed unavoidable. For the next week, Janet did everything she could to regain Brian's trust. After days of seeing his beautiful wife but maintaining distance, Brian decided to let go of his anger. They spent a passionate night together, and he ultimately forgave her, though he warned, if this happens again, I won't come back. Janet narrowly escaped disaster and vowed never to repeat the mistake. She shared the entire ordeal with her coworkers, admitting she had almost lost her husband because of her reckless idea. However, the women weren't discouraged. Instead, they brainstormed a new, foolproof strategy to bring Ian and Janet together before Ian returned to London. The group, especially the marketing team, treated it like a collaborative project. One member, Marcia, pitched an idea that everyone loved, pushing their efforts to a whole new level. Ladies, in 2 weeks, we're having our year-end celebration dinner at the Hyatt Hotel. It'll be a formal event with dinner, live music, and dancing. This year, they're inviting spouses to join. When I heard about this, I had a brilliant idea, Marcia began. You all know my husband, Clark, right? He's a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company specializing in anesthesiology. His company recently developed a new formula called S2-Mid. For those unfamiliar, it's a medication used to relax patients before surgery, rendering them unconscious within seconds and causing temporary memory loss. Once the drug takes effect, patients forget everything until they wake up. The original version of this drug was administered intravenously, but S2-Mid comes in pill or liquid form. It's Clark's latest big seller, and he's distributing it in large amounts. The product works even better than the original. And how does this relate to our plan? Gail asked while Janet looked confused. I'm getting to that, Marcia replied. Because these are controlled substances, Clark keeps his samples locked in his car. He's very careful, ensuring they're secure and inaccessible. However, when he takes my Mustang Cobra out for a drive, I can easily grab his keys, take a few samples, and no one will ever find out. Okay, Marcia, that's intriguing, Gail said. But what's the actual plan? You'll love this, Marcia said. At the party, when everyone's mingling, I'll grab a drink and casually pass it to Brian. I've noticed in past interactions that he can't resist a glass of Crown Royal. I'll carry 2 drinks and offer him one when he's ready. The effect will kick in within 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how much he drinks. He'll start feeling lightheaded, get drowsy, and eventually pass out in one of the chairs. We'll guide him first, then inform everyone that Brian isn't feeling well. Once that's done, we'll take him to your hotel room, put him to bed, and he'll be out for at least 4 hours, probably until morning. Turning to Janet, Mara added, when we get him settled, that will be your cue to head off with Ian. Go to his room, spend some time together, and we'll cover for you here. We'll tell everyone you went upstairs to take care of Brian. After a few hours, you can go back to your room, freshen up with a shower, and then lie down next to Brian as if nothing happened. Janet protested, I can't do this to Brian. You're asking me to drug my husband just so I can have a fling with Ian. Do you understand how insane this is? If Brian ever found out, he'd kill me. Sure, it might be thrilling and could help me get that promotion, but if he caught me, he'd divorce me. Mara responded, yes, it's just as crazy as passing up the opportunity with Ian. Don't worry, it's safe, and Brian will never know. Ian will owe you, and your promotion will be guaranteed. The last thing Brian will remember is you asking if he's okay and telling him you love him. When he wakes up in your arms, you'll have amazing memories of your night with Ian. And don't forget, you'd better share every juicy detail with us, sister. I don't know, Janet replied. This is nuts. Let me think about it. Things at home have improved, and Brian isn't upset with me anymore. I'll tell him about the party and gauge his reaction. Janet made her decision later that night. While lying in bed, she said, Brian, in 2 weeks we have our annual dinner, and spouses are invited. You'll need to clean and press your tuxedo because it's a formal event. We haven't gone dancing in ages, and I think it'll be fun. Sighing, Brian answered, Janet, as much as I hate these events, I'll go because I know how important it is to you. That evening, Janet showed her appreciation with affection. They shared an intimate moment, and afterward, Brian seemed happy and content. He fell asleep feeling satisfied, but Janet's own desires began to stir. The idea of a one-time fling with Ian, something she had never seriously considered before, started to take hold of her mind. In that moment, she made up her mind, texting Mara, I'm in. Can you handle the medication? A minute later, Mara replied, Leave it to me. No problem. Although Janet valued her closeness with Brian, the thought of being with Ian thrilled her. The excitement of something forbidden and fleeting consumed her thoughts. She wasn't sure if it was the idea of breaking the rules or the allure of being with her boss, but she resolved to stick to the plan. She promised herself it would be a one-time event, and Brian would never know. It wasn't anything serious. Nothing truly wrong, right? Over the following week, Brian noticed Janet frequently texting her friends. He knew the party was coming up, but couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few nights later, while Janet slept soundly, Brian unlocked her phone using their anniversary date as the password. For the next hour, he read in disbelief about the plan for the party. How the drug would be added to his drink, when to administer it, and how they'd obtain the key to his room to put him to bed. He uncovered every detail: who provided the drug, who would spike his drink, and worst of all, how Ian was involved in leading Janet to his room, while Brian remained unconscious. After Janet was finished with Ian, she was to leave his room, return to her own, and pretend everything was normal while Brian stayed asleep, still under the drug's influence. That was all Brian needed to see. He uploaded every message to the cloud, put her phone back in place, and attempted to sleep. It wasn't easy. The horrifying realization that the woman he loved had plotted to drug and betray him consumed his thoughts. Brian viewed this evening as a battlefield, determined to prepare for what lay ahead, and he vowed to make them all pay for their betrayal. Despite his growing anger, Brian maintained the facade of a devoted husband, carefully monitoring Janet's messages and staying informed about her plans until the scheduled party. During this time, he reached out to his Uncle Bob, his godfather, and a retired police officer. Explaining the situation in detail, the two devised a counter-strategy. With proper timing and a touch of theatrics, they aimed to outwit the entire group of schemers. Their covert team included Ellie Johnson, Uncle Bob's former partner from the police force, who joined forces with two of Brian's army friends, Craig Marks and Jimmy Jones. Ellie's assignment was to ensure Brian avoided consuming any spiked drinks at the party, while Uncle Bob, Craig, and Jimmy were tasked with handling the more challenging aspects of their plan. Reflecting on the night's events, Brian recalled the critical moments that followed. At the party, as anticipated, Janet wore an extremely provocative dress featuring a plunging neckline, paired with black-seamed stockings and high heels. Her makeup and hair were flawless, but it pained Brian deeply to realize she hadn't dressed this way for him. That she had done this for another man was a betrayal he would never forgive. You look stunning tonight, darling. Is this all for me? He asked, forcing himself to play along. Of course, dear. I want you to show off your gorgeous wife and be proud, Janet replied effortlessly, her lie cutting through him. She was plotting to drug him and engage in an affair right in front of his eyes, unconcerned about the humiliation he would face in front of her colleagues who were fully aware of her intentions. Brian couldn't comprehend why she was jeopardizing everything for what seemed like a fleeting affair. As his father had once said, sometimes women don't think rationally. Upon arriving at the party, Janet's friends quickly surrounded her, drawing her into a group that included Ian. Brian stayed close, scanning the room for Ellie, who was stationed nearby to assist with the drinks. Spotting her off to the side, Brian approached the group where Janet now stood beside Ian, who had his arm casually around her waist as he entertained everyone with jokes. Although every fiber of his being urged him to pull her away, Brian knew doing so would jeopardize their carefully laid plans. Instead, he stood silently, observing her behavior, the sight of which caused him immense pain. His stomach churned, and anger surged as he saw how completely she was absorbed by Ian, her focus entirely on him as though Brian didn't exist. He positioned himself near another man in the crowd, keeping a close eye on Ian's performance. Eventually, Ian noticed Brian and seized the opportunity to mock him. Well, look who it is, the accountant. Welcome, little man, Ian said with a sneer. At that moment, Janet glanced at Brian, momentarily startled as Ian continued. You know, Brian, I've got a few jokes you might appreciate. What do accountants use for birth control? Their personalities. The crowd erupted in laughter, Janet included, which stung Brian deeply. Ian continued ridiculing him in front of everyone, and Janet did nothing to intervene. Though each word felt like a blow to Brian's pride, he forced himself to remain composed, waiting for their plan to play out. Ian, clearly enjoying himself, piled on. Come on, Brian. You're just a typical boring accountant, he exclaimed, rattling off joke after joke. Each punchline drew laughter from the group, Janet laughing hardest of all. You know, Brian, your wife's got the best W2 sneakers I've ever seen, Ian teased. Oh, baby, let me withhold you, another voice chimed in, followed by more laughter. Technically, being with an accountant is a charitable contribution, someone joked. And Janet's loud laughter echoed, compounding Brian's humiliation. As Ian pushed further, Brian's anger simmered dangerously close to boiling over. If I help you cheat Uncle Sam, do I get to go next? Ian quipped. That was the breaking point for Brian. Unable to take any more, he turned and began to walk away, his jaw clenched. Ian called out behind him, still laughing, Come on, Brian! Don't go! Come back, little man! I had been joking, but a wave of anger overtook me as I stormed off. Sure, Ian might have had a few centimeters on me, but for context, I'm no small guy, standing 185 centimeters tall and weighing 90 kilograms. If I wanted to, I could break that Englishman in half. Janet was fully aware of that, but at that moment, I wasn't certain of much. Except for one thing, these fools needed to pay for the disrespect they were showing me. What could Janet have been thinking? Was she under his influence? Did she honestly believe I would just tolerate such humiliation? As I walked away, I suddenly felt someone's arm wrap around my waist. To my surprise, it was Janet. Honey, she said, he was joking. Come back with me. Glaring at her, I snapped, Are you out of your mind? You just stood there while he wrapped his arm around your waist. Laughing at me with the others, openly humiliating your husband. And now you want me to return? What kind of loving wife does that? I've never been so humiliated in my life. For heaven's sake, I earn more as an accountant than any of those clowns, and yet you acted like I was some fool. Just go, Janet. Go back to him. You two are perfect for each other. Brian, I'm so sorry. Please don't be upset. Let's sit and talk, she pleaded. Eventually, we made it to our table, and I noticed Ellie watching the situation unfold from a short distance away. Janet focused all her attention on me, trying to calm me down. After my second drink, I started to feel slightly more at ease. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Ian approaching our table, grinning like an idiot and extending his hand. No hard feelings, buddy, he said. Get lost, jerk, I retorted, startling everyone at the table. Brian, Janet exclaimed. He's my boss. Don't talk to him like that. Ignoring her, Ian had the audacity to ask her to dance. Janet, it's fine. I hurt the little guy's feelings. Want to dance? She glared at me angrily before taking his hand and joining him on the dance floor. After 3 dances, my glass was empty. And that's when Gail and Marcia approached, sitting beside me. Marcia had 2 drinks in her hands, signaling their plan was about to unfold. Ellie, observing everything, started to intervene. Brian, Ian just has that British humor. Don't take it to heart. Janet loves you. She's just trying to impress her boss, Marcia said. Here, I brought your favorite drink, Crown Royal, on the rocks. Trying to keep my composure, I responded, I don't know. I've already had enough to drink. Maybe I should just leave Janet here and head home. Both of them immediately shouted, begging me to stay. Standing up with my glass in hand, I discreetly swapped drinks with Ellie as she walked by. Then I sat back down and began sipping the watered-down Crown Royal she had prepared, leaving the original glass with her as evidence, just in case. Maybe you're right, I said. I'll just be the boring accountant, letting her flirt with her boss while I sit here like a clueless idiot. I drained the glass in one go, and the look on Marcia's face was priceless. She hadn't anticipated me finishing it so quickly. After I emptied the glass, the women said they needed to return to their husbands as the show was about to start. Left alone at the table, I watched as Ian and Janet continued dancing. My performance was flawless that evening. I slouched in my chair, pretending to fall asleep while secretly observing my wife blatantly flirt with her boss. Eventually, I rested my head on the table, feigning sleep. Soon after, I heard Janet and the others approach, trying to wake me. Janet leaned in close and whispered, "Honey, are you okay?" "Brian, wake up, sweetheart." I opened my eyes to see the woman who was betraying me, still professing her love. Closing my eyes again, I braced myself for what was coming next. Gail and Marcia lifted me up, escorting me out of the ballroom to my hotel room. Meanwhile, Ian and Janet slipped out through a side door, taking advantage of the distraction caused by the scene. I had been playing when we arrived at my hotel room, and I heard the sound of my phone alerting me to a message. At that moment, I knew our plan was underway. The women guided me to the bed and started taking off my clothes. Amused, I smiled as I caught their audible gasp upon seeing me. Gail, in particular, seemed stunned and remarked, "Wow, Janet didn't say he was this impressive." I don't think Ian measures up to Brian. If Janet leaves him, I wouldn't mind finding out what that's like. I can't believe she'd cheat on him. But I guess we're all part of this now. "Shut up, Gail! Let's get out of here," someone replied. Once the door closed, I stood up, chuckling at their remarks, got dressed, and checked my phone. The message read, "Room 1722 at 10:45. I had just 15 minutes to reach the room and meet Bob, Jimmy, and Craig. After freshening up in the bathroom, I grabbed my brass knuckles and headed out. At exactly 10:45, the four of us were positioned outside room 1722, only half an hour after the cheating pair had gone inside. Uncle Bob's role was straightforward: get us in and leave. We didn't want him involved in the events that were about to unfold. Bob knocked firmly on the door, 3 loud raps. Ian's voice responded from inside, asking, "Who's there?" "This is Sergeant Connor with the NYPD, Bob announced. "Please open up. We have an urgent situation." He held up his old badge to the peephole, and we heard the door click open. Bob immediately turned and left, clueless about what was about to happen, just as we had planned. My army buddies, Jimmy and Craig, stormed into the room, grabbing the unclothed Ian and pinning him against the wall. I entered with my phone recording everything. My naked wife, Janet, sat on the bed, and my sworn adversary, Ian, stood immobilized. The shock on Janet's face when she saw me was unmistakable, pure terror. She had no idea I'd be standing there before morning. Judging by her horrified expression, my face must have shown how furious I was. "You cheated on me for this?" I said, gesturing toward Ian's unimpressive build. "You ruined our marriage for him? You drugged me and lied to me. You've really crossed the line, Janet. Both of you picked the wrong man to betray." Turning to Ian, I noticed his eyes fixated on my brass knuckles. A smile crept onto my face. "What's wrong, Ian? No snide remarks? No smug grin?" He didn't respond. Instead, he stammered out a plea for forgiveness. The moment his first sorry escaped, I unleashed my fury, pummeling him until he blacked out. While I didn't intend to cause permanent harm, my final punch shattered his nose, sending blood splattering as he crumpled to the floor, whimpering like a terrified child. Looking back at Janet, I said, "I'll probably end up in jail for this, but right now I couldn't care less. I'm sure you'll defend your lover because he's all you have left now." Then, with her betrayal laid bare, I added, "Yes, Janet, I knew everything. Your plan to drug me, deceive me, and sleep with him. And even after all that, you plan to return to me, pretending to be the caring wife, saying I passed out at the party while you and your friends looked after me all night." But my plan was far more straightforward. As tears began streaming down her face, I continued. "First, you won't come home until tomorrow afternoon. Second, you're not to call or text me. Tomorrow morning, you'll be served divorce papers right here at the hotel. The courier will wait while you sign them, and they'll be notarized immediately. I'm not playing fair with this divorce. You'll get the house, which has around $80,000 in equity, but I'm keeping all of our savings and retirement accounts. I've already emptied our joint accounts and canceled your credit cards, so don't even bother checking. The terms clearly state you'll receive no support from me. We'll part ways for good, and with any luck, I'll never see your deceitful face appears before me once again. The car is fully paid off, so you can keep it. But from now on, all the bills, insurance, gas, electricity, and the mortgage are entirely your responsibility. Best of luck managing that. As for this man, I'll be sending these videos of the two of you to his wife. I'm sure that will bring an end to his fourth marriage. You have some catching up to do, but I'm confident you'll sleep with enough men to reach that milestone soon enough. Oh, one more thing. If you sign the divorce papers tomorrow morning, we can end this quietly, and no one else has to know about your disgraceful behavior. If you refuse, I'll send the videos to your parents and explain my reasons for leaving. I'll also make sure both you and your lover lose your jobs, completely ruining your reputations in this field. We both know how much your career means to you. I don't want it to come to that, so sign the papers by 9 a.m. tomorrow, or the life you know will end. I'll have my belongings out of the house, and whatever remains, you can toss out or donate. Janet, now openly sobbing, tried to plead. Baby, please talk to me. Don't do this. I only wanted to be with him once. I don't love him. I don't even want him. It was supposed to be just for fun and to help me get that promotion. He's leaving for London next week, and I'd never see him again. Why can't you understand? I refused to subject myself to further humiliation and ignored her pitiful excuses. Turning to Craig and Jimmy, I said, Guys, head home. You were never here. I'll take full responsibility for anything that comes next. Once they left, I looked at my wife and said quietly, Janet, I loved you, but what you've done is unforgivable. You knew how I felt when you first suggested this, but you still chose to betray me. You conspired with others, humiliated me, and even drugged me. You essentially kidnapped me just so you could be with that loser. You almost got away with it. Please, Brian, Janet pleaded, don't divorce me. You know I love you. I don't want anyone else. Give me a chance to prove it. This meant nothing to me. It was supposed to happen just once. He's nobody compared to you. I see how stupid I was now. Please don't do this, sweetheart. I chuckled bitterly. Janet, this would almost be funny if it weren't so pathetic. You're lying naked in Ian's bed, still covered in his mess, and yet you're trying to convince me that you love me and we shouldn't divorce? This video will make for some interesting viewing later. You're nothing but a workplace fling now. I'll never touch you again. After tonight, I have no plans to see you ever again. After an uncomfortable silence, I continued. The time for talking is over. When you and your coworkers conspired to drug me and cheat on me, you destroyed our marriage and everything we built together. Do you remember the children we dreamed of having? Emily and Jason? Because of you, they'll never exist. Our life together is now nothing more than a sad memory. Tell me, Janet, was this fling worth it? I hope so, because you sacrificed our future for that loser. Great job. You can have him now because this is the last time we'll ever be together. I walked out of the room, leaving her to collapse onto the bed. All her careful planning had gone up in flames. Her selfish one-time act brought devastating consequences, leaving her without the man she truly loved. Sobbing into her pillow, she struggled to comprehend how she'd allowed things to come to this. Delirious and heartbroken, she began screaming incoherently. When Ian, lying on the floor, regained consciousness, Janet screamed at him, But Brian! The girls told me you'd forgive me because you love me. It was only supposed to be once. It was just sex, for God's sake. Just sex with Ian. Can't you understand and forgive me? I'll make it up to you. I'll never do this again. Please don't leave me. I love you. But Brian was already gone. The damage was done, and she now had to face a future without the man she claimed to love. Gail, Marcia, Ian, and Janet were all arrested and charged with serious crimes including conspiracy, kidnapping, possession of drugs, and assault using drugs. Gail received a 2-year sentence for conspiracy. Marcia was sentenced to 10 years for conspiracy, possession, and assault. Ian received 2 years for conspiracy, though the kidnapping charges were dropped. Janet was also sentenced to 2 years for conspiracy. Naturally, Janet, Marcia, and Gail lost their jobs, and their criminal records destroyed their careers. After serving their sentences, the women were forced to take menial jobs they once considered beneath them, crushing their sense of pride. Marcia's husband, Clark, lost his job due to the scandal and could not find similar work. He divorced Marcia during her incarceration. Gail's husband also divorced her, and her children disowned her, never visiting during the ordeal. Ian pressed charges against Brian for assault and a serious nose fracture. However, after the jury reviewed the case, Brian was acquitted. Ian's wife divorced him, and he lost his job due to the criminal charges and allegations of workplace harassment. Janet attempted to sue Ian for sexual harassment in civil court, but by the time she was released from prison, Ian was already divorced and penniless. After prison, Ian received no severance pay or job references. The last anyone heard, he was broke, unemployed, and serving 5 years of probation. The luxurious lifestyle and freedom he once enjoyed were stripped away overnight thanks to his arrogance and inflated ego. Meanwhile, Brian moved on, and true to his word, never saw Janet again. 5 years later, he remarried Gloria, a woman even more beautiful than Janet. Gloria was intelligent and loyal, promising never to betray him. However, once burned, twice shy, Brian insisted on a prenuptial agreement before they wed. Having endured so much, trusting another woman was not easy for him. At 31, Brian was happily married, expecting his second child with Gloria. Janet, on the other hand, never recovered from losing Brian, the only man she truly loved. Her depression lingered, and as she lay alone in bed one night, something that had become her routine, she scrolled through Brian's social media, as she did every night since their divorce. Seeing a photo of Brian with his son Jason and newborn daughter Emily, she wept. Brian had built the family she had carelessly thrown away over one selfish betrayal. Janet never remarried and could never forgive herself for her foolish, selfish actions. Regret consumed her, not for what she had done, but because Brian had found out. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Secrets. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.